What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors finally reaches his breaking point on live television? Today we're diving into the explosive moment that had everyone talking, when Liam Neeson walked off The View after Joy Behar pushed way too far. This wasn't just another awkward celebrity interview. This was a masterclass in how not to treat your guests. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story gets intense. It started like any other Tuesday morning on The View. The studio buzzed with its usual energy as makeup artists put finishing touches on the hosts and crew members, adjusted lighting for the day's taping. Liam Neeson sat quietly in the green room, reviewing his talking points for what was supposed to be a straightforward promotional interview for his latest action thriller. He'd done hundreds of these appearances over his decades-long career, and The View had always been professional in the past. "Mr. Neeson, we're ready for you," a young production assistant called from the doorway. Liam nodded, straightened his jacket, and followed her through the narrow corridors that led to the main studio. The familiar theme music was already playing as he took his position just off stage, waiting for his cue. "Please welcome our next guest, the legendary Liam Neeson," Whoopi Goldberg announced with her characteristic warmth. The audience erupted in applause as Liam walked onto the set, his tall frame commanding attention even in the bright studio lights. He waved to the crowd and took his seat at the curved desk, exchanging pleasantries with each of the hosts. "Liam, it's so good to have you back," Whoopi said, settling into her role as moderator. "Tell us about this new film of yours." "Well, it's called Shadow Protocol," Liam began, his distinctive voice carrying easily across the studio. "I play a former intelligence operative who gets pulled back into the world he tried to leave behind when his daughter is kidnapped by a criminal organization he helped dismantle years earlier." "Sounds like another one of your Taken movies," Sarah Haynes commented with a smile. "Do you ever get tired of playing the protective father figure?" Liam chuckled good-naturedly. "You know, people often ask me that, but I think there's something universal about a parent's love for their child. These roles allow me to explore that primal instinct to protect the people we care about most." "That's beautiful," Sunny Hostin added. "Your characters always have such depth beneath all the action sequences." The conversation flowed smoothly for the first several minutes. Liam discussed his preparation for the physical demands of the role, working with the stunt coordinators, and his thoughts on the current state of action cinema. The host seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions about his craft and his approach to bringing authenticity to larger-than-life characters. "You know, Liam," Joy Behar interjected, her tone shifting slightly, "you've been making these action movies for quite a while now. Don't you think you're getting a bit old to be playing the tough guy?" The studio fell silent for a moment. Liam's expression remained composed, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. "Well, Joy, I think experience brings a different kind of authenticity to these roles. I'm not trying to be a 20-something action star. I'm playing characters who have lived, who have scars, who understand what's at stake." "But come on," Joy pressed, leaning forward in her chair. "You're 71 years old. Isn't it time to maybe try something different? Maybe a nice romantic comedy where you don't have to beat people up? I think audiences connect with stories about resilience and determination at any age," Liam replied diplomatically. "And I'm actually 69, but who's counting?" Joy waved dismissively. 69, 71. The point is, you're not exactly in your prime anymore. I mean, when I watch these movies, I keep thinking this guy should be in a retirement home, not jumping off buildings." The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances. Whoopi cleared her throat, clearly trying to steer the conversation back on track. "Liam, tell us about working with your co-star in this film." "Yes, Rebecca Martinez is phenomenal," Liam said, grateful for the redirect. "She brings such intelligence and strength to her role as an FBI agent who becomes my character's unlikely ally. The dynamic between our characters really drives the emotional core of the story." "Speaking of emotional core," Joy interrupted again, "let's talk about your personal life. You've been a widower for 15 years now. Don't you think it's time to move on? Find someone new?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Liam's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I prefer to keep my personal life private, Joy." "Oh, come on, you're a public figure." Joy shot back. "People are curious. You can't just shut down every time someone asks about your love life. Are you dating anyone? Are you even trying to date?" "As I said, I prefer to keep those matters private," Liam repeated, his voice maintaining its calm tone despite the obvious tension building beneath the surface. "You know what I think?" Joy continued. apparently oblivious to the warning signs that were becoming increasingly obvious to everyone else in the studio. I think you're stuck in the past. You're making these revenge fantasy movies because you can't deal with real life. It's like you're living in some kind of perpetual grief cycle. Sunny Hostin looked horrified. Joy, maybe we should... No, I think this is important. Joy bulldozed ahead. Here's a man who clearly has issues moving forward, and instead of dealing with them, he makes movie after movie about getting revenge on bad guys. It's like therapy through violence. Liam's hands remained folded in his lap, but his knuckles had gone white. I think you're making some rather significant assumptions about my psychological state based on the fictional characters I portray. Am I wrong, though? Joy challenged. I mean, let's be honest here. Your wife died in a tragic accident, and ever since then, you've been making these movies where you hunt down the people responsible for terrible things happening to families. That's not a coincidence. The silence that followed was deafening. Camera operators continued rolling, but every person in that studio knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't just inappropriate anymore. It had crossed into cruel territory. Whoopi Goldberg finally found her voice. Joy, I think we need to respect our guests' privacy on certain matters. But Joy Behar was like a dog with a bone, completely ignoring the clear discomfort of everyone around her. Privacy? He's a movie star, Whoopi. He puts himself out there. And honestly, I think the public has a right to know if the actors they're supporting are dealing with unresolved trauma that might be influencing their career choices. Liam's voice, when he spoke, carried the controlled intensity that had made him famous in roles like Brian Mills. Miss Behar, with all due respect, you're not qualified to psychoanalyze me or anyone else on national television. I don't need to be a psychiatrist to see what's obvious. Joy retorted, her voice rising. You lost your wife in a skiing accident, and now you spend your time making movies about men who lose their families and go on killing sprees. It doesn't take a genius to connect those dots. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to crawl under the desk. Maybe we should talk about the technical aspects of the filmmaking process instead. No, I want to finish this thought, Joy said, holding up her hand to silence her co-host. Liam, don't you think your fans deserve to know that when they buy tickets to your movies, they're essentially paying to watch you work through your grief in the most violent way possible? The color had completely drained from Liam's face, but his voice remained steady. My personal experiences may inform my choices as an actor, but that's true for every performer. We draw from our lives to bring authenticity to our roles. But there's a difference between drawing from experience and being trapped by it. Joy pressed on relentlessly. When was the last time you took a role that didn't involve someone dying or being taken from you? When was the last time you played a character who was actually happy? I've done plenty of dramatic work that doesn't fit that description, Liam replied, though his patience was clearly wearing thin. Name one from the last 10 years. Joy challenged. Liam paused, and in that moment of silence, Joy pounced like a predator, sensing weakness. See? You can't, because you've pigeonholed yourself into this cycle of grief and revenge. And the worst part is, you're making millions of dollars off your own unprocessed trauma. Sunny Hostin looked absolutely mortified. Joy, this is really inappropriate. Is it, though? Joy turned to face the camera directly. Here we have a man who clearly hasn't dealt with his wife's death, and instead of getting proper help, he's channeling his pain into violent fantasies that he then sells to audiences worldwide. Don't you think that's worth discussing? Liam's hands slowly unclenched, and he placed them flat on the table in front of him. When he spoke, his voice carried a dangerous quiet that made everyone in the studio lean in despite themselves. My wife's name was Natasha Richardson. She was a brilliant actress, a devoted mother, and the love of my life. Her death was a tragedy that changed me forever. And yes, it influences my work because it influences who I am as a human being. Thank you, Joy said, as if she'd scored some kind of victory. That's all I was asking for. A little honesty about how your personal trauma shapes your professional choices. I wasn't finished, Liam said, and something in his tone made Joy's triumphant expression falter slightly. What you're doing right now, what you've been doing for the past 10 minutes, is using my grief as entertainment for your audience. You're treating the most painful experience of my life like it's a parlor game, something to be dissected and analyzed for ratings. Joy's defiance returned quickly. I'm asking legitimate questions about how personal experience influences artistic choices. This is what good interviewers do. Good interviewers show respect for their guests. Liam replied. They don't weaponize tragedy for shock value. Oh please, Joy scoffed. You're being way too sensitive. This is The View, not some puff-piece entertainment show. We ask tough questions here. There's a difference between tough questions and cruel ones, Liam said, his voice beginning to rise for the first time. You're not interested in my artistic process or my career. You're interested in watching me squirm while you poke at old wounds. Whoopi tried once more to intervene. Let's take a breath here and maybe move on to discussing the action sequences in the new film. But Joy was completely committed to her destructive path. I think what's really happening here is that Liam can't handle being called out on his pattern of behavior. He's used to doing these softball interviews where everyone just praises him for being such a great action star, and he doesn't like it when someone actually challenges him to think about what he's really doing. What I'm really doing, Liam said, his control finally beginning to crack, is trying to have a professional conversation about my work while you turn it into amateur psychology hour. See, there it is, Joy said, pointing at him as if she'd proven her point. You're getting angry because I'm hitting too close to home. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't separate your personal feelings from your professional choices, and that's exactly the problem. The audience had gone completely silent. Even the camera operators seemed frozen in place, unsure whether they should keep rolling or stop the carnage that was unfolding before them. This wasn't television anymore. It was a public execution disguised as an interview. You know what the real problem is, Joy? Liam asked, his voice dropping to that familiar dangerous whisper that audiences knew meant trouble was coming. The real problem is that you think being deliberately hurtful makes you an insightful interviewer. You think cruelty is the same thing as courage. I think honesty is important, Joy shot back. And I think celebrities who make millions of dollars off their personal trauma should be prepared to discuss it honestly when they come on talk shows to promote their work. And I think talk show hosts who use that platform to humiliate their guests should find a different line of work, Liam replied, his Irish accent becoming more pronounced as his anger built. The tension in the studio was now so thick it was almost suffocating. Every person present knew they were watching something that would be talked about for years to come, but nobody seemed to know how to stop it from spiraling completely out of control. Joy Behar leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smirk, completely oblivious to the fact that she had just crossed every possible line of decency. Look, Liam, I'm not trying to be mean here. I'm just doing my job as a journalist. Sometimes that means asking the hard questions that other people are afraid to ask. Your job as a journalist? Liam repeated, his voice barely above a whisper, but somehow more menacing than if he had been shouting. Is that what you think this is? Journalism? Yes, actually, Joy replied defiantly. Real journalism isn't about softball questions and promotional fluff. It's about getting to the truth, even when that truth makes people uncomfortable. Sarah Haynes made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Maybe we could talk about your upcoming projects instead. But Joy wasn't finished with her assault. No, Sarah, I think this is important. We have a responsibility to our viewers to ask meaningful questions. And I think it's meaningful to explore how personal tragedy shapes artistic expression, especially when that expression consistently involves violence and revenge. Liam's hands had gone completely still on the table. When he spoke, his voice carried the cold precision of a man who had reached the absolute limit of his patience. You want to talk about responsibility to your viewers? Let me tell you about responsibility. Responsibility is treating your guests with basic human dignity. Responsibility is understanding that there's a difference between probing journalism and public humiliation. Oh, come on, Joy waved dismissively. You're being dramatic. I asked some tough questions about your career choices. That's what talk show hosts do. No, Liam said, and now his voice was rising steadily. What talk show hosts do is create an environment where their guests feel comfortable sharing their experiences. What you've done is turn my wife's death into a talking point for your entertainment value. Joy's expression shifted slightly, as if she was finally beginning to realize that she might have gone too far, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. I never said anything disrespectful about your wife. I simply pointed out the obvious connection between your personal experiences and your professional choices. You called my career a grief cycle, Liam shot back, his composure finally cracking completely. You suggested that I'm making money off unprocessed trauma? You turned the most devastating experience of my life into a punchline for your audience. Whoopi Goldberg looked frantically at the producers off camera, clearly hoping someone would step in to end this disaster. but the cameras kept rolling. "Liam, maybe we should take a commercial break," she suggested weakly. "No," Liam said firmly, his eyes never leaving Joy's face. "I want to finish this conversation since Miss Behar is so interested in getting to the truth." "You want to know the truth, Joy?" "The truth is that my wife was an extraordinary woman who brought joy and light to everything she touched. The truth is that losing her nearly destroyed me. And yes, it changed the way I approach my work because it changed who I am as a person." Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Liam held up his hand to silence her, his movement sharp and commanding. "The truth is that I choose roles that allow me to explore themes of loss and redemption because those themes resonate with me on a personal level. But the difference between acknowledging that connection and what you've done here today is the difference between insight and cruelty." "I wasn't being cruel," Joy protested, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "I was being honest about patterns I observed in your work." "Honest?" Liam's voice cracked with emotion and rage. "You want to talk about honesty? Here's some honesty for you. You're not a journalist, Joy. You're a bully with a microphone who gets her kicks from making people squirm on national television. You hide behind the pretense of tough journalism, but what you really do is emotional vandalism." The studio had gone so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning seemed deafeningly loud. Even the audience members who had been shifting in their seats throughout the interview were now sitting in stunned silence. "That's completely unfair," Joy said, but her voice was smaller now, defensive rather than aggressive. "I ask challenging questions because that's what good television requires." "Good television?" Liam stood up slowly, his tall frame casting a shadow across the curved desk. "You think this is good television? You think humiliating your guests and exploiting their personal tragedies is good television?" Joy looked around desperately at her co-hosts, clearly hoping one of them would come to her defense, but they all sat in uncomfortable silence. Sunny Hostin was staring at her hands, Sarah Haynes looked like she might cry, and Whoopi Goldberg appeared to be praying for divine intervention. "You know what, Joy?" Liam said, his voice returning to that dangerous calm that had become his trademark in dozens of action films. "You're absolutely right about one thing. I do have patterns in my work. I do gravitate toward stories about men who refuse to give up when faced with impossible odds. I do play characters who will do whatever it takes to protect the people they love." He began to unfasten the small microphone clipped to his lapel, his movements deliberate and measured. "But here's what you got wrong. Those aren't the movies of a man trapped in grief. Those are the movies of a man who understands that some things in life are worth fighting for. Some things are worth protecting. And some things, like basic human decency, are worth defending even when it means walking away from people who wouldn't recognize it if it slapped them in the face." Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. The reality of what she had done and what was about to happen was finally sinking in. "Liam, please." Whoopi tried one final time to salvage the situation. "Let's just take a step back here." But Liam was already pulling the microphone free from his jacket. He placed it carefully on the table in front of him, the small thud it made somehow thunderous in the absolute silence of the studio. "I came here today to talk about my work," he said, looking directly into the main camera. "To share my passion for storytelling and my gratitude for the opportunity to bring these characters to life. Instead, I was ambushed by someone who thinks personal tragedy is fair game for cheap entertainment." He turned his gaze back to Joy, who was now visibly shrinking in her chair. "I've spent my career playing men who stand up to bullies, Joy. Today, I get to do it in real life." And with that, Liam Neeson turned and walked off the set, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence as he disappeared through the same doorway he had entered just 30 minutes earlier. The cameras continued to roll, capturing Joy Behar's shocked expression and the uncomfortable fidgeting of the remaining hosts. But the real show was over. In trying to tear down one of Hollywood's most respected actors, Joy had instead revealed herself to be exactly what Liam had called her, a bully who had finally picked on the wrong person. Make sure you subscribe for more explosive celebrity moments and comment below with your thoughts on whether Joy Behar went too far this time.